All right, as we've discussed, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday heard oral arguments in Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, the case of former high school football coach Joe Kennedy, who was fired for praying in public on the 50-yard line after the football game. Now, the coach's supporters are optimistic that the court will protect his free speech rights and religious freedom. Mike Berry, one of his legal advisors, was on the program on Monday talking about that. But on the other side, there are those such as the president of the Americans United for the Separation of Church and State, which, by the way, represents the school district. He says that a ruling in Coach Kennedy's favor could be, quote, the greatest loss of religious freedom in generations, end quote. So, which side is really protecting religious freedom? Joining me now to help set the record straight is Arielle Del Turco, who is Assistant Director of FRC's Center for Religious Liberty. She yesterday released a publication on the topic of religious freedom. Arielle, welcome back to the program.
Good to be with you, Tony.
All right. First off, before we get into your new publication, which just came out, let's talk about this case because it's closely related to what your publication talks about. Two sides in this case who are invoking religious freedom, saying they're protecting it. What is religious freedom at its core?
Yeah, I think religious freedom can be a bit of a term that sounds abstract. It's thrown into these debates that are often very heated. But at its core, religious freedom isn't abstract. It's quite personal. At its core, religious freedom is the ability to choose, change, and to live out your faith. And living out your faith is really what's key here. And even in this case, for Coach Kennedy, living out his faith meant praying on the sidelines of the football field after he coached a game. So we can see how it's quite personal, and that's why religious freedom is so important.
So you kind of address this in the publication, Religious Freedom, a Human Right and a Pillar of American Society. And by the way, folks, you can get a copy of this. You can download a copy of this. You can go to tonyperkins.com and follow the links over. You can order a copy. You can download a copy, whichever you prefer. But you talk about the history, and we can't look at religious freedom in the American context without looking at American history. And when you look at religious freedom, as you talked about, it's the ability to live out your faith. And as Christians, the Bible is very clear. Whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do all for the glory of God. So if eating and drinking is of concern to God, where you work, how you conduct yourself, what you do beyond the four walls of the church matters to God.
Yeah, absolutely. And religious freedom is just so woven throughout American history in a really essential way. Even the Pilgrims coming over, landing in what became the United States, they were motivated in large part by an inability to fully live out their religious beliefs in their own land. And so they sought freedom here.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because oftentimes people, they came here for religious freedom. Okay, don't stop there, though. That religious freedom, they wanted to build community. They wanted to create a society that was just totally saturated with their faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why religion, it's not just private, right? If you can't pray in public, if you can't express your faith, you don't truly have religious freedom at all.
So, Arielle, what type of threats are we seeing to this fundamental freedom right now?
Well, I think sadly, Western culture is growing increasingly hostile to traditional Christian beliefs, but honestly, it affects other religions too. We're seeing a radical gender ideology taking root in our school systems, for example. So it's a little wild to think that some of the things that are happening in schools where teachers are maybe allowed to talk about their gender preferences and their sexual history, but not talk about prayer or their faith, or even in the case of Coach Kennedy, be seen praying by students.
That's crazy. Why does this matter?
Well, it's so core to humanity, Tony. Humans are just driven to ask these questions. Why am I here? How did I get here? How should I live out my life? And these answers are often found in religion. So if people aren't allowed to seek religion and then live according to their conscience with the conclusions they come to.
Arielle, But does not all of society benefit from religious freedom? So it's not just the people who get to participate in it, but all of society has benefits that are derived from this freedom.
Oh, absolutely. The flourishing of religious institutions in America, it has very obvious benefits. You see large NGOs and nonprofits really taking care of the poor and taking care of social needs in ways that governments aren't even always able to. So there's very practical benefits as well. And even on an international scale, we've seen where religious freedom benefits national security.
Right.
When you don't have these groups in conflict over which religious laws should be established and which religious group should have power, you're looking at a much more peaceful and a much more prosperous world.
So everyone should be interested in protecting and promoting this fundamental human right.
Absolutely.
All right. Arielle, thanks so much. Great work.
Thank you.
And folks, again, you can get a copy of this. It's a new publication just out. Go to tonyperkins.com. You can either download a copy or you can order one. It's Religious Freedom, a Human Right and a Pillar of American Society. And I think it just gives you more ammunition in your fight to defend religious freedom.